So in this video we're going to cover the industrial presser beds and the steam irons we have in the studio. Now these are a little bit different to your domestic, and they're a lot stronger with regard to the power and the pressure of the steam. So these are only switched on when there's a member of staff in the room. So if you're working after hours or at a weekend, you will need to use the irons in the other studio, which we'll have a discussion on those later, tagged on to the end of this clip. So these presser beds actually get warm. So you need to be careful that if you've got something like your small scissors, your snips from your machine, if you put them on the presser bed, they will get hot when you pick them up. So be careful on that. It's best to put them maybe underneath on the shelf we've got below. These irons, when they're at rest, need to be at their highest point and as far to the right as possible. When we want to iron, we just slide them across and we bring them down on the pulley system. Now it's important we don't leave them at sort of half-mast. Someone might come towards you and you're talking and you're unaware, you're going to burn yourself on the iron. So we need to make sure always highest point and over to the right when they're at rest. They have a button on the handle for steam. So you can see that's a lot more than you'd get from your domestic iron, so you need to be careful. There are cloths at the side so that you can express any steam first before you start ironing where they may have been rested and the steam is built up. We also have a treadle at the bottom. If we depress that, it cools the presser bed, also the work that you have on top. So if you've pressed something and it's warm, it will crease a lot easier. So if we cool it before we move it over the bed, it's less chance of it creasing any further. The sleeve arm, if we're going to engage that for the cooling, we move this lever on the side. We then press the treadle, and the same thing, but it will be on the sleeve board this time. Once you've finished, make sure you put it back so that the next person who comes to it, it's set as it would be for standard. These irons are usually set on the highest setting because when we're using toiles, fabrics, it's usually calico and it's cotton, so it's up very high. So also be careful of that when you're pressing. If you intend to turn the temperature down, remember you don't get steam if the iron is cool. We only get steam if the iron is hot. So don't be tempted to press this button or water will just gush out of the machine. And please let other people know if you've turned it down and turn it back up once you've finished. Other items to help you with your pressing are a tailor's ham. You'll get to use these in certain processes, primarily second year. You have a seam roll, and we have a clapper. And this is also to help turning through on corners. I say primarily those are second years when we get onto tailoring, but they're here for you to use at any time. So that is our presser beds and industrial steam irons. These are the other irons in the other studio. These you can switch on and off yourself. You don't need a member of staff to be around. So normally they will be switched off. There is a dial at the side, and then we have the switches on the front. This is our little boiler, which has our reservoir of water, and then there are switches actually on the presser bed for the iron and heating up the bed. So this runs exactly the same as in the other studio. There is the treadle and the lever, and we have the button on the iron. These then rest flat on the rubber mat and they're not suspended as in the other studio. Once you switch them on, these will need time to warm up, 10-15 minutes. The pressure dial on the front, you will see that this little hand will rotate and then you will know it is warm enough. And then you will get steam. Prior to that, the iron might be hot but no steam. If you switch them on, you need to make sure you switch them off, or at least the last person in the studio, whether they've used the irons or not, needs to check that this equipment is switched off and not left on overnight. Now, because these are a self-contained unit, in this hatch here is where you would put water. There are jugs on the windowsill behind me, which you can fill up in the kitchen that's just outside the studio. And you need to fill this reservoir with water. If it gets too low, it makes a horrendous noise, so you know it needs filling up. But please keep an eye on this if you're using this equipment. I check as well, but if, for example, you were working over a weekend, I wouldn't be here to check, so you need to keep an eye on that. So remember, you're switching it on, you're switching it off, and check those water levels.